Hello, everybody. Welcome to another special episode of Embodying the Logos. I'm here with Gustav. We've shared a room in the Germany before the Breakwater Festival, or during, I guess. So we've been talking for a while, and Gustav has been diving in the Aramaic, I think. Kind of. What was it?
Yeah, it's technically Syriac, but it's kind of the same thing in some
Well,
ways. In some
basically
ways
one of
not,
these
but
weird languages that were around during the Hebrew, and they share similarities. And well, he'll explain his reasoning for why he dove into this, but he prepared a slideshow that he wants to discuss with me around the symbolic meaning of these words and how they connect to basically what we've been talking about in the Peterson sphere, especially Peugeot's area. So yeah, Gustav, take it away.
yeah. So can we open the presentation? Just the first slides. So I think the the point of all this is that it started out with me learning Syriac for whatever reason. I just kind of fell into it, and as I was learning, I realized it was really similar to Hebrew, the Semitic languages, and very closely related. And I realized that a lot of the words connect things in ways that don't connect sort of implicitly in English. And I realized that Peugeot has made a lot of use of this kind of language and has gained insight into symbolism through the language because sometimes different derivatives of one word in Hebrew can mean things that are like very different in English. And so this one word in Hebrew or in Syriac, technically, pulls together a lot of different ideas in English that Peugeot can kind of connect. But yeah, we'll go through them and you'll see what I mean.
Yeah,
And
so
as I
so
was
I
learning,
I, I went through your stuff, um, and like I got this idea, right, that there's like an essence, and then that essence gets like specialized into a specific domain, and so when you use, well, English is a weird language, right, because it uses Latin, Greek, what is it, Gaelic, right? Or well, at least. Oh man, like now I'm butchering and everybody's gonna be mad at me. But there's French in there, and there's the ancient English, right? I lost the word for that. So they all come together, and they borrow words from everywhere, and then it's like, well, how do you connect a word that comes from one direction to a word that comes from a completely different direction, right? Like, how do you see the similarity? Well, you'll go into it, right? But there's a simplicity in these ancient languages where it's all flowing from the same place, um, the same symbolic space, for example, and you have identified how these connectivities that are there, uh, that aren't as visible in English in that sense, right? It doesn't mean that the connections aren't there, but they're just not um, prima facie,
yeah,
like
yeah.
in
So
your
so
face.
so put technically, the essence that you're referring to is the root of the word, and the root is generally speaking three consonants. And then the specialization of the word happens by putting different vowel patterns in between those consonants. And so you can, from the same three consonants with different vowel patterns, you can have a verb and a noun and like other stuff. So if you have a different consonant pattern, you could say either I am writing, you wrote, or book, or perhaps scribe. So yeah, that's one way of doing it. So uh, I think yeah, the point was that sometimes these words seem super connected, like in English, like scribe, book, and writing, but sometimes they aren't that connected. And so I can definitely see that Peugeot sort of brought things together.
So
And the idea was that
I
I
like
noticed these.
I want to ask you a question about, because you were using the word distance between words, right? I don't know if you still have that, but like what would be a measure of distance between words, right? Like
I don't know. Maybe you could say something like the stuff that I think it's Vervaeke and Peterson are talking about right now about the distance between the language, like between the nodes, the words, and the language models. Maybe that's one way to do it. One way to do it.
hmm so that would be just frequency in use then, or something.
Yeah, maybe.
Like connect, yeah, okay, because it's like what you're saying, right? And like this is my objection to that is that that is really subjective, right? Like it's basically like I don't have to connect writing, scribe, and book in my head, right? Like that's not necessary. I do it because I'm thinking in a certain way, right? That makes sense to put them together. But if you, well, like for example, right? Like when you ask someone who's in the city where meat comes from, they don't connect it to farm or cows, right? Like they connect it to factory, right? So these connections are a consequence of also like habitualization, right? Like how do you use the language, and what are the frames that you're engaged with, that present these ideas to you, right? Like do you ever encounter them in your life?
That's a good point, I guess. But I'm kind of coming at this from the point of view that Aramaic is, in some sense, a sacred language, and also that all of this um, connectivity is very ancient and holds wisdom that Peugeot has clearly used and that we can engage with in some way. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, kind of, right? Like another thing that I was thinking about is that we've been chopping things up, right? Because like we like motivated by the scientific reasoning, we want to be precise in our language, right? So we started making more and more specific words, right? And like what happens when you make something more and more specific, when you move away from from the essence, right? And you start relating more and more to the particularities of the instantiation, right? And that's, so what are you doing? You're removing yourself from the spiritual, the heavenly, and you're moving closer to the earthly, right? Like you, in some sense, that's pragmatic, right? Because you're trying to relate to the functionality in front of you instead of the eternality that gives what's in front of you its being.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know enough languages to be honest, but
No, but
um,
I think that's just a general pattern, right? Like that happens with specialization, and I think that's what the Tower of Babel is also about, right? Where you have this unified language, and then as a consequence of working together and doing more and more complex tasks, you start developing languages that um, facilitate that task, right? But now you're getting more and more removed from daily life, right? From practical uh, and experiential realms.
yeah, I agree, and I find it a little bit amusing because the Syriac church, whatever tradition, claims that Syriac is the original language before Babel. So so yeah. Anyway,
But
I
so,
think we can just get to it and like think about the
well,
different words,
one
and
last
we'll
thing
see
is,
how it works.
so you're
Okay,
trying with this process, you're also trying to validate in some sense what Peugeot is talking about, right? So you're trying also to find confirmation in some sense of the things that he's, yeah.
maybe I think in some sense I've discovered the validation. I'm just sharing it.
Okay.
And also I'm very curious to see whether you can see something, because
Hmm.
sometimes the things aren't that connected. And I've engaged a lot with Peugeot stuff, but you haven't as much, although you have as well. But I'm curious to see whether it kind of works, whether it can be communicated.
Okay.
Okay, so shall we begin?
Yeah, let's get going.
Yeah. So the first word is Shema, or yeah, there's different derivatives of it, but the the noun of Shema means name, and then the noun plural is heaven. So it's like one Shema is just a name of something, and then when you take it into the plural, it sort of names, but it also means heaven. So when it says God created the heavens and the earth, um, it means, yeah, God created sort of, yeah, the heavens, but he created the domain of names. It's the domain of identities, this parallel sort of world in which meaning manifests, identities manifest. And I think it's super significant that Peugeot also specifically says, well, not says, but points out how Adam is the mediator between heaven and earth, and how he gives names to animals and lays out the heaven on earth in this way. The names come to earth and they are um, assigned to the things. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. I'm like when you said the word assigned, I actually there was a lot of resistance in me because like I the way I think about it is it's like there's stars in heaven, right? And people gather under the stars, right? Or things gather under the stars, right? So the stars draw things into them, right? And if you're drawn into that, then you are named by it, right? So 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 it, if if you look at it as a gravitational, well, the star is a gravitational source actually. Um, there's um, there's there's a center around which things, if you would plot them, right, they would gather around, and I think if we talk in Jungian terms, like Jung calls that a constellation, right? So it's like a set of things gathering together, and then if that is coherent enough, it gains its own identity, right? Like it has an integrity, right? And like what is the thing that we recognize it by? Well, like that which they all share in common, right? Which is their center, that which they organize around, and that from there they get their identity. Where you can also, well, we both studied chemistry, right? Like it also happens there, right? Like it's the nucleus uh, that gathers things around it, and then you can have a set of nucleus gathering into a molecule, right? And then they have orbitals around the whole molecule, right? These electrons, they start spinning in bigger and bigger uh, rotations, making a union, right? So it's like what is the union? Well, like literally in chemistry, we define the union as the nucleuses and how they are organized in relation to each other, right? Like that's how we make the definition. We don't make the definition by that which goes around them. Although the external identity, most of it at least, is defined by those electrons and how they interact with the external environment. So it's like a skin, and now I'm like, why am I in chemistry? But
No, no, it makes sense. My question back to you would be, then what is Adam's role in all this? Because you kind of skipped the role of Adam in giving names to the things on Earth, or like the names receiving things on Earth for them, or whatever.
well, like okay, like if we think. the way I think of Adam is like Adam is the one who's able to look up from earth, right, to heaven, and to see what where things gather around. Like what is their identity? Like he's able to identify or name, right, the earthly thing. And now we get into something that I haven't really thought about fully, but I'll just share it here, right? So there's a bunch of perspectives, right? So there's the perspective, well, we just go with the molecule, right? There's a perspective of the electron, right? So it's like who's the electron, right? Like the electron is like is it different when it's here than when it's here, right? Like, or is that the same electron? Like it's something in motion, right? Like it gets it's being by constantly moving around and being attached to the center, right? So that has a perspective. It has a way of reasoning about the world, right, from that place. Now you also have the actual molecule, right, like the centers, which are stable, right? They don't move much, and they hold these electrons around them, right? So that perspective is different, right? Like so now we have an eternal perspective, right? Like it's unchanging, and
Well,
and
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 and and and, and it gets solid as it goes out, because like even in larger molecules. So for example, if you think of like a sulfate ion, it is a central sulfur atom that holds together multiple oxygen atoms surrounding it, and that's even a more rigid structure. And then as you get larger and larger molecules, you still kind of get that pattern of like the atoms on the, so instead of nuclei holding electrons, you have more important atoms holding less important atoms, maybe.
as well, yes, right, yeah. So you get a hierarchy within that as well. Like I don't want to get into that too much, right? But you can see
Yeah.
how the complexity builds, right? But also how there's identities that is from the shared atoms, right? Because that's what a molecule is, right? Like there's a sharing, and they build into a larger identity. And like, well, we can relate this to angels probably, but we're not going to do that. um, so that's two perspectives, right? And then there's the observer, right? Like there's the third person, right? So you could say that um, there's a first person perspective. Maybe that's I'm just trying around now, right? Like that's the static perspective, right? Like um, it's the molecule itself, right? Then there's the second person perspective where it's the things that move around, and then there's the third person perspective where there's an external person in relationship to that, right? And the the that which stands outside, right, has a different relationship, right? Because now you can place the thing in relation to other things, right? So you can place the electron in relation to its nucleus, right? And you can place the whole molecule in relation to other molecules as well, right? So you can see how it performs in the world, right? So all of these things, right? All of these states, they um, they have different relationships, and I think it kind of the metaphor kind of broke down a little bit in when I went into first, second, and third person. But I'm trying to show that there's some analogy there with these different perspectives, right? So you're speaking of Earth, right, which is looking up, right? Like it's not only looking up, it's actually rising up to meet the heaven, right? In worship, just to go all Christian, and then there's heaven coming down to inform earth, right? And then there's something that is in relation to both and mediates as well, right? Because that's the role of Adam, right? Like it's not only the naming, it's the mediation, right? So it's a more involved process than just arbitrary naming. It's also a participation in that process.
That's really great. You've definitely thought about this.
Well, yeah. That was all inspired. There was no thinking involved.
Oh,
Like,
that's even better. That's even better. I love that. Anyway, let's go on to the next slide. We'll have lots of stuff to think about. So the next word is AHR. I won't even try to pronounce it because the A isn't the proper A and the H isn't proper A, just like Acher or something. I'm not sure. But so this, for me, this connects a lot with like the end times and the end of things, where Peugeot talks about you come to the end of things and then the end of things looks like this, looks like that. Um, it's like it's meaninglessness. It's like the carnival, all that stuff that's very much in vogue right now. Perhaps we're living in the end times. Well, this has to do exactly with that. So it has a lot of meanings, but it kind of also means just to be the last part of something, and it gives a feeling that you're part of like a procession of people, like a group of people going on a hike maybe, and then you're the last person. You're not necessarily um yeah, it's a different perspective on what it means to be the end of something. It's not like something is finished. It's just something reaches its conclusion, I guess,
right.
which
So,
I'm not sure how to characterize fully.
well, like this immediately brings me to what we end at with church, and we say, well, among other things, I'm the head, not the tail. It's talking about the tail, right? And what like if you look at a crocodile or whatever, right? Like what does the tail do? Well, it gets dragged behind and it leaves a mark on the ground, right? And so if you contrast the tail to the head, right? The head is that which has intention, like it's aware, like it's in relationship, and the tail is the complete opposite, right? Like the tail is always following, but it's not following in a straight line. Like it's literally following because it's attached.
Mm. Yeah. That's really great because it all has to do with this arrangement of like the center and then the margin. Is that the margin? It only really exists in relation to the center, but it's also kind of not really there.
Right. And then it's like, okay, like, so like what are the qualities of the tail, right? Like, well, it leaves something behind, right? Like, so you can recognize something by its tail, right? And it's also signifying the completion of the pass, right? So if the head passes, s- things still unfold, right? If the tail passes, things have unfolded, right? If you're in the head, you get to participate, right? If you're in the tail, everything gets decided for you.
Yeah, that's really good. And another thing I'd really like to point out about this word is that as an adjective, it also kind of just means the stranger or the foreigner, and it also means different or other. It's sort of if you phrase things, or maybe if you frame things in a binary, it's sort of like you would use that this adjective to describe the other part of the binary, the stuff that's left over, the stuff that isn't within,
Hmm. So the
which
way that I connect that is if you take a ship, right, and it moves, and then things are left in its wake, right? So so there is something about the identity of the ship, right? Because the wake is also a tail, literally, right? Like it's like
it looks
which
the
is
same.
not. Hmm?
It even looks the same.
Exactly, and it's not the same, right? Like it's not the ship, right? Like it's created by the movement of the ship, which is like the tracks of the till slipping in the bank as well, right? Like so there is a foreign, like I'm improvising here, right? But that is connected to the body, right? Because there's also foreign that's unconnected to the body, right? Like that which is in interaction with the body is influenced by the body, right? Like so it still trails the body, even though it doesn't share the identity with the body. It shares some identity with a approximation, or like a proximity. That's the word.
Well, I think the whole foreigner and other and different, it implies that maybe it actually identifies opposite something or identifies against the head.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, in contrast to, right? Maybe that's the better
Yeah,
word.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I
Yeah,
like that. I need to write that down.
it's good. All right, let's move on to the next one. So the next one is all this stuff is really connected. The analogies we're using, I think, really fit for a lot of these. So the next one is kind of me bringing together two different words that are still very similar because they're kind of the same word, but the the Hebrew has like two different H. One is like h, and the other one is like h. I can't tell the difference, but other people can. So I you can see how etymologically the word could like shift from one to the other really easily. Oh, and also they're written very similar. And yeah, so one of them kind of just means to go around. It has to do with a circle, and to siege something, to kind of be around it. And then the other khadar has to do with a tiara. It has to do with glory, with decorating something to adorn it. And I think this also has to do with the marginal or external part of something and how it does both things simultaneously, but that each of these words maybe expresses slightly different aspects, but you can still see what unifies them,
Hmm.
right? That they're two different aspects. It's like to besiege something, to go around it, and then to adorn it, to glorify it, to be a crown on your head, like a tiara. Do you
Hmm.
have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, so I unified them in my mind. I got them under one word, and it's to attend to from all sides, right? And if you attend to something from all sides, then you appreciate the wholeness of it, right? And so you can see the excellence, glory, honor, if like if there's a at least a positive quality of that, right? Like so it gives the capacity to do that, right? But it also, if you have a more negative version, it's you can hold something, right? You can control it, for example, right? Like if you have something from all sides, then you know how to manipulate it, right? Like science is trying to do that in some sense, like to define a space, right? An experiment, and then have all the variables constrained, right, under control, and then vary the variables and see what happens. So now we can manipulate that which is inside. Um, so that's one association. The other association I had was Jericho, because I think both of these, Jericho was besieged, and they were doing a procession around Jericho in worship of the ark, or at least with in worship with the ark. And in some sense, there's a transformation of that worship into glory by the walls falling and having victory without uh, the imposition of force, which is really interesting. So like I'm just thinking that there must be a lot of wordplay between these in that.
Yeah, there might be. I think I think it also really connects to the end as like the marginal part of something. Is that by yeah, it's kind of like this circle around the thing. If you look at it as like a wheel with the spokes, but the the main me- the main unifying thing I kind of get from this is that by having this covering, by having the circle from all sides of something, it sort of it it betrays no, not betrays it. It just reveals really clearly that there is something in the middle that is really important.
Yeah,
So if you
and
have
we can go
a
back to
siege
the
of something,
molecule.
if you have like a million people around the city, there is something really important inside. Even if it's like
Mm.
bad, maybe. If it's evil, I don't know the proper word, but if you have a million people trying to get to it for whatever reason, that's like it's kind of a crown.
Yes, 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 yes. Yeah, so if we go back to the molecule, right? Like there's these electrons that go around, right? And then you get into this space where, well, there's literally space. There's no occupation of the space, and then there's other molecules, right? And so, like, how do we know something is a thing? Well, basically because we can draw a circle around it and uh, not transgress against its identity, right? So if you would draw a circle through the middle of the molecule, you'd split it apart, right? And it would no longer have its quality. And if you have multiple of them, right? Like now instead of having H2O, you have water, for example, right? Which is something different than H2O.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. But also the H2O around the molecule, like they do tend to kind of orient in a certain direction around the molecule. Um, yeah, but also in this word, there's another meaning which has to do with vagrancy and with beggars and with the surroundings of a place, which maybe are like the slums. Like Peugeot also uses the word slums a lot. I can connect that to here. And it also sort of it's this part of the city that maybe you can remove, and maybe the people there actually live a really terrible life, but it betrays that there's well not but I keep using the word betrays. It reveals that there's something really important in the center of the city. That like
Yeah,
the
and
city is great enough that it can actually have these parts around it.
yeah, so the slums they were abandoned during sieges, right? So they're like yeah, what is it? Like outposts that that
Mm,
that aren't permanent, and 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 so like what is that is which is protected? Well, it's that which is contained within the walls, right? And that which is outside of the walls that like it's like floodplains, right? Like it gets flooded by the externalities and therefore isn't really part of the city.
yeah, that's really good. Do you think we can move on?
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one also has a lot to do with this. We're sort of moving from one idea, just flowing into the next one. So, first of all, kol or kul is a very, very just like it's one of the most common words in the Hebrew language or the Syriac. It means everything. So if you said every man, you would say kol nesh or something like that. It means all of something. It means every. So it's everywhere in every bit of the text. But there are some words that are derived kind of from a similar root. So for example, kalila is crown as well. So if you crown something, or if you give a what is called like a garland, which is like a crown of leaves, that's derived from this. And it also means the rim of something or the circle around it. It has lots of different words, lots of different meanings in here. The arc, kidneys. Don't know what's up with the kidneys. Don't understand that, but it's in there. And it also means to complete something. It means to give a crown to someone, to crown something. It means to surround with a wall. And also it has a meaning to do with prohibition or restrain, kind of stopping something. And all of these words to me are unified in this idea of a wall surrounding something. So very similar to the previous one, but somehow different. Like it expresses a different perspective, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. Like the word that I immediately wrote down after talking and didn't before is category,
Mm,
right? So this is a category. It's a group of things, right? So when I made the distinction between H2O and water, like water is expressed by a multitude of H2O molecules coming together, or atoms. Atoms. No, no molecules. Oh my god, I keep switching these things up in my head. Anyway, so so yeah, like what is a category? Like because water isn't like it's less sensible than H2O, right? Like H2O is something that you can relate to, but like water literally slips through your fingers. Like if you want to like capture water, it's something ineffable, right? Like it's but it's still something, right? Like it's you still recognize it. Um, and the same goes for like a human, right? Like, well, I can identify you, right? Like that's pretty easy, but identify humanness as such, right? Like now we're getting into something really difficult, right? And sort of like, what do? Well, you define things, you put a wall around it, like, and that's a different type of naming, right? Like, and this naming is not self-evident, right? So if we're going to, well, what can we do science upon? Well, maybe we can do science upon the specific, right, on the molecule, but maybe we can't do really science on water. Like maybe that's too ineffable to really have a scientific relationship to, right? And then like, oh, like, so there's an instantiation, and then there's a group of things, right? And like the group in somehow transcends the identity of the individual, right? Because it, like, the sum of the parts is more than the whole is more than the sum of its parts, right? Like there's some newness that, right? And that's why we also have to wall it, right? Because this newness deserves its own name. Its own. It has its own identity. Um, so yeah, other associations I had with this was wholeness, fulfillment, and perfection.
But it doesn't seem to be like a infinite all inclusion or like an infinite finishing. It's like a boundedness. It's a bounded category. It's
Right,
got a limit to it,
right,
a
which
wall.
makes it real, right? Like, because that's the thing that I think we've lost in modern times, right? We started making categories that are not bounded by reality or their reality, right? Like there's an inherent reality in in something, and like if we start making categories that aren't actually relating to something that's there in reality, now we become misguided. Like we're navigating on a star that doesn't exist or doesn't have a stable place.
Yeah. And I think just one association that literally just came to my mind has to do with the linen wrap, which in the dictionary it's specified is the linen wrap that you put around the Eucharistic elements. So I assume like on the altar before they are revealed, there's a wrap around them. And this connects to me to the death shroud of Christ, the shroud of Turin, which in the same way is removed from the body at the sort of at the resurrection in a way, and it's sort of the linen wrap is the wall or the yeah it's the wall, the wrap around the completed, like the finished person when he's dead at the end of his
Oh,
life.
oh, that makes sense, right? And then you have the ark as well, right? So there's something there in protecting that which has manifested, right? Like uh, yeah, there's like because there's this thing in Christianity that we will be like the stars, right? So like there's a fulfillment and then a yeah like a crystallization, right? Like we become outside of time. Like time does not affect us anymore because the effect of time upon us has completed. Um, and like maybe that's kind of what's being pointed towards.
Any more ideas?
Probably, but we can keep going.
Yeah, good idea. So the next one is one that I'm actually not entirely clear about, and it's also one of these super common words, melar. And there's
Mhm.
lots of closely related roots that are put in this one. So I'm not gonna read out all the words because there's just too many meanings, and some of them are really similar, some of them aren't. But just to give a quick recap of the meanings, it would be word, so it has to do with speaking, and this word mela is used for logos, so all the kind of Greek philosophy and all of that stuff. It got imported into the Syriac language, and it used mela for everything. And it also means the first milk after delivery of a child, and then it means to fulfill something. It means science, discourse, and kind of talking about stuff. I think that has to do with logos. And then there's also a related
Dialogue, right?
dialogue. There's also a related word very closely, which means the flood. So the deluge, the flood of Noah, and the ark. That also has to do with this.
Hmm.
And yeah, just fulfillment and consecration, actually. So do you have any ideas, Manuel?
Yeah. So what I wrote down is this seems like a process of making or maturing, right? So
Okay.
it's like when you have a vessel, um, you fill it up, right? Like that's what the milk is, what the flood is. Like the flowing of water into something is it's giving it form, right? Like it's giving it body. So what is this mother milk, right? Like this mother milk is that which transfers the baby from helplessness to the first state of self-sufficiency that it can put food in its own mouth, right? Like that's a transitionary thing before it can become self-reliant, right? So there's a
Mm-hmm.
sense of care, there's a sense of responsibility, nurturing. Seems to be like really feminine as well, right? Um,
Yeah, it does seem feminine, and it kind of gives this feeling of like you are being surrounded on all sides by like the the space that you're in. The space you're in is
yeah, the womb,
overtaking you.
like it's a womb, right? Like
Yeah.
and then you are in some sense you're being labored, right? Like it's overcoming the labor is because you can look at the stages of development, right? Where first the labor comes at you, right? Like then you mature and then you labor yourself to bring things back, bring this into being, right? Um so I think this is like related to the first stage, and like now I'm just also connecting it to morning. Uh, like I think it's related to the first part of the day as well.
Mm. Maybe. I don't have anything more to say about this. Okay. So the next one is kasar, which has a lot of very similar meanings, which kind of has to do with covering something, with concealing it, hiding it, clothing it. So lots of words, which I think um, seem really obvious, maybe, but you have to remember all of these words that I've written down here are like literally the same root, just like like pronounced slightly differently. So they associate really closely to like the Hebrew speaker's brain, especially like during liturgy and things like that, when you would maybe use these words in certain ways. So it means a veil, so the veil of a woman, a covering up for the head, concealing something, hiding something, and then there are some slightly more marginal, maybe, meanings which I couldn't really connect that much, which has to do with the time of the full moon and also, yeah, the full moon is the one that I didn't understand so much, and maybe
Hmm.
taxes as well. But
So so I think this actually connects back to the previous word that we were describing, right? So if we're looking at it, like there's something in the vessel, something in the womb, and then there's the womb, right? So like I feel like this is talking about that which holds things, right? That
Hmm.
which contains things, right? So what is full moon, no moon, right? So like between that, time is contained, right? Like that's the edges of the cycle between
Mm. Okay.
between which things go, right? So it's talking about the boundaries, but the boundaries that hold something in it, right? And
Yes. 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 Yes.
um,
No, that's super super significant, super important, I think.
right. So it's also relating to the part. That's at least what I have written down here, and
Hmm.
relating to the separation of the part. So what does a container do, right? Like it's separating, but it's different than a category, right? So a category separates based upon, well, pre-existing separation, right? And this separates upon imposed separation, right? Like this is artificial, right? Like artificial by time, artificial by man, a cup, right? Or or coverings or whatever, right? And then, right, like when you separate something, you take it away, right? Like you remove it. You not only remove it from participation, but you also remove it from awareness. Um, so I think that's where the concealment comes in, right? Like the concealment is relating to availability to awareness, and so if you take something away, like it's no longer partaking.
Yeah, and I see with this like a huge I wouldn't like it's not a parallel, it's more like orthogonal with the hadar, with the crown, with the siege, is that that is like something that covers something that reveals its importance, whereas the veil is that which covers and it kind of hides it.
Right. And you can look at it as directional as well, right? Like so like glory is something that attracts things in, right? While a veil is that keeps things out, right? So like I've been connecting this to the Greek, right? Because you have these fundamental movements. You have ex and in and like you have all these prefixes that relate directionality, right? So the way that I see this language is it's trying to capture these fundamental archetypical um, well, what is it? Well, it's spatial temp, but like you see the way that they move here, right? Like so they they're connecting something a constraining thing, right? They don't care whether it's applying to time or to space or to awareness, right? Like like they see a universal principle and they base the word on that principle and they just apply it in all of these different realms.
Yeah, I think it's just profound, and learning all this stuff has been great. And one last thing I'd like to touch on here is to do with the beaker and the chalice, which uh, again goes back to Eucharistic symbolism of kind of the hiddenness and the hidden place. And well, the Eucharistic Grail is identified with the Mother of God usually, and it has to do with like the covering and the being the space in which something um, very important can happen in secret, in which something happens in secret,
Mhm.
and you kind of need a covering for that to happen. I guess I don't know.
Yeah, and Jesus also says, right, Father, please take away my cup, right? And like, what's the cup? I heard that that cup is referencing to, I think, what they did to Socrates, right? Like it's the cup of poison that you're supposed to drink, right? Like it's
Mm.
that which holds your fate, like, and so a cup, in some sense, was that which brings, well, like that which is going to come.
Yeah. Yeah,
The
that's
future, right? Like what the future is also concealed, hidden, right? So maybe that's yeah.
yep. It's really useful just thinking in terms of these like symbolic units, symbols. It it helps a lot. Anyway, so the next one is quite quick. It's sacher, and it means to witness, to testify. Martyrs. Oh, and it refers to the moon as well. So it means moon, and it literally also just means martyr. So someone who dies for their faith. And yeah, it has to do with the crescent, with silver, with lunar stuff. So do you have any thoughts on this?
Yes, embodiment, right? That's what it is. Like giving flesh, like the fully living out. That's what I'm seeing here.
Okay. Yeah. So uh, I think it has to do with reflection, with emanation.
Mm,
Is that when you reflect, the moon is reflecting the light of the sun. In a similar way, the martyrs are reflecting the light of, well, probably Christ. And it also has to do with how, well, not always, but if it's nighttime, it means the sun isn't there. But sometimes you can see the sun through the moon. So in a similar way, when it seems really dark, maybe you can see what you are following, what you should be following through something that is more close to you, that is still reflecting that light.
right.
And I think it has to do with changeability, with how the sun is not very variable, it's very reliable, whereas the moon is more changeable.
Yeah. So different way to say it, right? Like the sun is heaven, the source, right? And then there's an earthly uh, thing that is trying to reach up to it. And what do we witness, right? Like we witness the actual reaching in some profound way of heaven by earth, right? Like that's what we are witness to, right? Like that's what the moon is, right? Like if the moon is full, it is a fulfillment of its reflection of the sun, right? So we got to experience an image of the sun, right? So we can be reminded of the sun, right? So that's really obvious in our experience, right? But then if we're talking about a saint or whatever, right? We get through the saint, we get to experience something that Christ embodied. Like they had that too, and that allows us to get an understanding, get a relation to what Christ embodied himself.
Yeah, and I think the silver is also very important here because in the Bible, silver is associated with the priesthood, so with the priests, and so you also have this sun moon duality. You also have like maybe the high priest and the rest of the priests duality because and you also have gold and silver.
Mhm.
So gold is incorruptible, it's like the pure authority and all this kind of stuff, and silver is like it reflects the properties of gold but imperfectly because silver also it is it is corruptible and you do need to like renew it, refresh it, and it's yeah, it's I think it's good symbolism.
And silver and therefore the priesthood, right? They're supposed to be a bridge, right? So they're also doing the work of Adam, right? Which is also bridging heaven and earth, right? But now they're bridging heaven and earth to the people, right? Instead of to creation, right? So there's a
Mm.
different
Yeah, and
direction
and
there.
it's just like the moon in the nighttime kind of maybe helps the sun reach somewhere where it can't, where it isn't reaching at the time.
Well,
Yeah,
yes. No, that is really profound. Yes, right. It's bringing light where the sun can't shine. Well, that's
yeah,
yeah, that's good.
yeah, it is. Okay, so the next one is one of my favorites. It's menar, and also it's one of those super common words, which is just used as a interrogative, so it means like what. So you kind of have it at the beginning of sentences all the time, and it has to do with counting, with numbers, with quantity, with science, and I see a lot of materialism kind of stuff in it, and the reign of quantity, as it's been talked about quite a lot. And the most interesting moment for me is maybe the worms and weevils, because it's kind of a quantity overtaking something. So if you have something that's
But
too
there's also
large,
the
you
creepy and crawly things that go on the earth with creation, right?
oh yeah, 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 and also something that definitely needs to be pointed out is that mammon is directly derived from this word.
Mhm.
Mammon
So,
also means money.
oh, right. So if we do Genesis quickly, right? So this is that which lives closest to Earth, right?
Mm,
And so
wow. Yeah, yeah,
Mammon is like the materialism, right? It's that which emerges immediately, right? Um, that the lowest level that you relate to. And so what did I have written here is expression. So it's relating directly to expression, which is in some sense in this context also emergence, right? Like it's primary emergence without having a relationship to heaven, right? Like it's not informed by heaven. It's just coming from earth. Um, and then the second thing is I had multiplicity, right? So it's if we take heaven as the center, right, and then we go out from heaven, it's on the outside. It's that which has existence but hasn't been flooded yet, right? Like it's above the waters in some profound sense. Um, so it's also in some sense um, the furthest that we can reach, right? Like it's also the edge of intelligibility in some way.
yeah.
Um,
Like it's well, materialism kind of rejects that sort of inherent intelligibility, like it rejects the heavenly.
mhm. Well, yeah,
It kind of
because
it goes down to the
like
earth.
if you look at it as a hierarchy, right? So maybe we can find all these things in Genesis and give them proper names, which obviously they already have. Just understand the names that they have been given. But and like that maybe should be for the next video that we can just like get all the Hebrew names and stack them up and see like how they relate to each other. Um, but this idea, right, that if things come from heaven to earth, right, when you stand, right, when you place yourself on the furthest place from heaven, you can only see down, right? Be, like because there's a flow from one place to another, right? So the further, the lower you get, you can only see what's below you. You can't look up, right? Like the looking up is happening not by building a wall around something, but by relating to that which holds things together, right? Like the center, the heavenly part of something. Um, and so if and that's what I was trying also to point out with these three perspectives, or these three relational things, right? That if you well, we can use the Platonic framing, right? So you have the good in the center, right, which is timeless and eternal. They make a distinction because that's one, and then it's not one. But like I'm not going to get into that nonsense. And then you have that which relates the timeless to time by things that are not eternal because they're conditional upon the timely, but they're not in time themselves, right? So that would be angels or spirit. Like, is it spirits? No, I don't think it's spirits, but like it would be angels and souls and stuff like that
Yeah.
would would populate there. And then you have the things that are in time and space, right? Oh yeah, they're in time but they're not in space, right? And then you have the things that are in time and space, right? And they have a corporality, right? this is also why people say that the angels are jealous of humans, right? Because they don't have uh, corporalities, or they can't
Something like that.
manifest.
I don't know.
Anyway,
That's what
whatever.
they
Like,
say.
yeah, maybe I should just stay away from that stuff. But so, like, how did I get there? Oh yeah, so so how? Well, now we get into Plato, right? Well, because we were talking about Neoplatonism as well. But this outer sphere, right? Like, how does that connect back up, right? Like, it can relate to what's there, right? What's below it, but how does it move into this, well, ineffable space, right? Because it's not visible, right? And it's not manifesting in matter, right? Like, so the identity that it has, like, comes from its crown, from its glory, I guess, right? Because that's the thing that allows us to discern it, right? Like, what is its glory? Well, it's that the way that it moves things around it, right? Or gathers things around it, like you said, around the city. Like, if there's a million people around the city worshiping, like, what is bringing these people together? Well, there's some glory there that they're trying to relate to.
Yep, yep. I totally, I totally agree. And yeah, there's another idea that's just like not leaving my mind is how. So Mathieu Peugeot makes lots of interesting points and interesting diagrams, and there was one he made a while back about how mammon is it's a cloak that is used by, I don't know, the Antichrist or evil or like demons or something. And the
Mhm.
idea I think there is that it's a cloak because it's used as an excuse. It's kind of like um y- because when it's used as an excuse, you can hide the real intentions behind it, of how
Yeah.
you can say, "Oh, I'm doing this because of money. We're doing this because of money, money and riches and things like that." But in reality, oh, and then you can just say that the money is making it happen. But
Mhm.
money doesn't move anything. People move money, and it's
Yeah.
the intention that's moving it.
So now I'm also relating this to the idea of diabolos, right? Like, to split apart, right? To make a
Yeah,
part, right? And so, what is an explanation? Like, what is splitting things apart? Well, you're you're trying to see how all the things work together, right? So when you split things apart, you're trying to identify the qualities of all the parts in the hubris that you can reconstruct it into the whole, right? But we already went over that the whole, right, the water has a separate identity, right? Like, the sum of the parts is the whole is more than the sum of the parts. And so, like, when you try to understand the whole from the parts, you can't. Like, that's fundamentally impossible, because there's new functionality that arises in the wholeness, right? So everything that is based upon the parts and not upon the wholeness is a distraction, because it's not relating to what it should relate to. And it's a cloak, right? Like, it's hiding you the truth from you, even though you have a lot of intelligibility. Like, it gives you a bunch of look, I got all the parts, look at me, like, I took my computer apart,
yeah,
but now it doesn't work.
yeah. I think this word is like a really helpful one that brings a lot of stuff together. Let's look at the next one. So the next one is Nahar or Nahor, something like that. And I was weirded out by this when I was learning the language because I would be reading something and I would be like, oh, the river of something. And then it turns out, no, actually it means fire. It means light. So the they're really, really close. Like they're pretty much the same word. Just light, river, and also mirror is the same word. And the verb has to do with flowing, with shining, burning. And also pyramid. I'm not sure I get that one. But I think it has to do with the linear emanation of something, maybe from the perspective of that which it's like emanating towards. So you're because you cannot, because light looks very different from the perspective of the one from who the light is emanating out of.
Mhm.
I don't know if that makes
Right.
sense.
Right. So enlightenment, right? You can get really close to angel there, right? Um, instruction, commentary, comment, right? So what is instruction, commentary, comments? What do they have in common? Well, they make a connection for you, right? Yeah, I think you're correct with your explanation about from the emanation flowing, right? Um, so the way that I described it when I was reading it first time, when we didn't have the context of this conversation, is what comes into what feeds, right, or sustains,
Okay.
right, which wisdom makes sense in that context, right? That which sustains, right? So in some sense, it's like if you make a connection, right, that connection flows, that connection feeds you, that connection sustains you, right? Like it grants you identity, right? Like it allows you to be informed by it. You conform to it. Um, and so this is different than the milk, right? It's because it's it's in some sense it's something you engage yourself and doesn't get imposed upon you. Um, and so it has different qualities, right? So what does a river do? Well, like it flows, right? Like it overflows sometimes. It brings life. But if you're connected to something, right? For example, Christ, right? He brings life, but he also burns you, right? This is the hellfire, right? Like he burns away the dead wood, like the parts of you that have served its function and don't look up to heaven, right? They're not partaking in your name anymore, right? Like they're taking you away from the name, right? Like they're diabolos, they're of mammon. They make you look down or back into the past, right? Like they
Hmm.
hold you stuck in where you're no longer. Um, so yeah, like I think the pyramid is that which humans, right? Like how man reaches up to heaven, right? Which is also what a beacon is. So I'm also connecting this to sacrifice, right? With the smoke going up. Uh, so so there, but I think that would be the other side of the coin, right? Because this is the perspective of the emanation going down into earth, and then there's you asking in prayer, right? You're asking for the thing to come down. You open up the space the that the vessel that like you become the vessel that can contain the river.
Yeah, and I think I should point out just that both of these things have to do with life and good, like it's good things. It's things God would probably describe as good. Like it's fresh water and it's life. Um, and I also have this idea of like how we identify that which is coming towards us with that which is coming towards us, not with that where it's coming from. So you wouldn't say that's um what's it called? A spring, like a spring of water, is flowing towards you. You would say a river is flowing towards you. Like you also wouldn't say a lantern is coming towards you. You would say light is coming towards you. I don't know, something like that. And I think also the linearity of these things kind of matters, but I'm not sure I can
it's the
why.
directionality, right?
Mm,
I don't because I don't think fire is the opposite of linear, right? Like that doesn't make any sense to see fire as linear and burning as well.
true.
Like
Yeah, and I'm not sure what the people would in old times call light linear. Like we kind of think of it that way because of photons and lasers and stuff. They probably wouldn't.
well, but you have shadows, right? Like there's
Yeah.
but there's two things. There's two functional. Well, more, right? So you have the fire which burns, right? But it's also the source of warmth, right? And it's also that which you, right? Like it's a place of glory because you gather around it. Like there's all of these things, and this the source of warmth, the source of light, but it's also artificial. Like there's a lot of stuff going on with fire.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on.
Oh yeah,
I
you
think
use
I
it to
think
cook. Don't forget that part. You use it to cook and to sacrifice as well.
well, you also use water to cook.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, so this I think is the last word for today. So it's gana, and these meanings are you can kind of really visualize the perspectives, the different meanings in this. So it has to do with lying down. It means to cover something. It means to hide and to dwell within, to conceal, to be protected, to kind of to maybe like run away from a conflict or something and go be in a cave and be safe there. It has to do with a refuge. And one of the most common meanings, I think probably the most common usage, is garden. So the Garden of Eden is described as a Ganad Eden, the Garden of Eden. Also, bridal chamber, which is
Mm.
like this room that people used to do, which is at the marriage ceremony, you would have like this special room just for the newlywed couple, um, which isn't done really so much anymore. Maybe like a honeymoon. I'm not sure. I don't go to weddings very often, but it has to do with rest, with a gardener, with protection, and also the part of the moon which is dark to us. So presumably they knew that the moon didn't like disappear or turn into a crescent or something. It was like it was dark. Uh,
They might have added that later because that was also a question that I had for you. Is like, well, how much of this is what is it that we read back into history current?
yeah, I don't know.
Because like that's uh, difficult, right? Especially with these words. It's like okay, like how do I translate one language to another, right? It's like okay, like I have this idea in my head and I see these people, I recognize them, these words and their actions, right? And then I can connect it to this word, right? So it's like, well, when did that connection get made, right? Like, is that something that got made fairly recent, or is that something that stems from the ancient times? And like, do we have the perspective that allows us to understand why that connection is made, right? Like, do we get what was going on when that connection was happening?
Yeah. Actually, I think I can immediately answer that question. Like, I don't look at stars very often, partial for multiple reasons, but they definitely did know that the moon didn't like disappear because imagine that, because like, but I think this also has to do with the meaning, is that you can't see the stars behind the dark part of the moon. The stars are
Yeah.
still obscured behind it. And I think this has to do with the meaning of the word as well, is that it is simultaneously a concealed part of the moon, and it's also concealing something within itself. So it's like this fractal thing happening. And for me, that definitely associates with garden, is that a garden is a place that is protected from the world, it's shielded from the world, because you do need walls around gardens. It needs to be obscured. But then again,
Mhm.
a garden is a place which protects you from the sun. It gives you shade, and it's a place of rest because of that.
Well, not only the sun, also from the not garden.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
So yeah, no, I like this profound connection to heaven, huh? Well, because like that, like it's like it's it it is partaking in a constellation, right? Like the dark side of the moon is again, right? It's like okay, there's the sun, uh, there's where the sun don't shine on the moon, but it's also then the moon not shining on Earth, right? So there's a second hiddenness because the moon is dark, right? So there's less visibility on Earth because
Oh
well,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
right, and so in some sense, right, you can also connect this to regression in some sense, right? Like when the fullness of something isn't experienced, right? Like we're experiencing a lack of sight, right? Of clarity because now we're lost in a way, right? So but that doesn't well, that's blame me maybe, right? And to conceal, right? Like there's a lostness in there. Um, so let me see what I had. Um, that's not the word. GNA is a partner separation. That's what I came up with. Oh yeah. Um, so I also connected this to the category and the vessel, right? And like I'm also connecting it to the Holy of Holies, or at least to the Holy, maybe not the Holy of Holies, but to the Holy. Well, you can see it with the wedding and all that, like with the bridal bed and the garden as well, right? It's that which is set apart, right? So it has a special quality, right? And um, like, what does that say about its identity? Because now we're like at like a third validity for a name, right? Like now the validity doesn't come from its material. It doesn't come from how it organizes in bigger things, right? Which is what a category is. But now it comes from our relationship to it, right? And that we, yeah, we like relate to it differently, right? Like we make it special. We lift it up, right? We
Hmm.
glorify it in some sense, right? Like so it protects us, right? Like or it gives us protection, right? Like it enables us things, and because it enables us things, we therefore have a special care for it, like a special relationship to it, right? Because what happens in the marital bed, right, or the bridal bed, well, new life gets made, right? So it's in some sense it's a source or a relationship to the source or an enablement of the source, right? And like there like I connected then to well to the place where you go for prayer, right? It's like you allow the special thing to happen, right? To bring you allow the seed to be planted,
Yeah,
right?
it's gardening because gardening is the participation in the life of that which is like good for you.
Right. And will bring new
It's
life, right? Like it will bring
yeah,
food for the future. Um, yeah, it's a preparation for that which is to come, which is like the building of the ark. Um, so what did I write down? A partner separation, right? So yeah, you set things apart. You and you lift them up as well. Like that's I guess what what it means.
yep. I think the visual image that this word conjures up for me is the Garden of Eden, with the hand of God sort of hovering over it and just keeping it safe from the world.
Yeah, maybe we
Um,
should go into the story a bit, right? So there's this garden, right, which is this refuge, protection, shelter, but also something of union and giving life. or not giving life, it's a prerequisite, right? Like it's pre-giving life, right? Like it's that which allows the giving of life, right? The feeding to occur, right? Like it's enabling the state of being fed. Um, so what what Adam and Eve did is they did something in that place that they weren't supposed to do, right? Like they tried to well, it was knowledge, right? Like they tried to grasp for something which is unattainable.
Well, they break the rules.
Yeah, yeah, but for what purpose, right? Because they wanted to know the knowledge of good and evil, right? Like, and they wanted to be like gods.
Yeah, there's this one idea that I have that I'm not sure if I can restrain, but it's sort of like there's this idea of self-awareness that Piaget brings up quite a lot about how the they were they were naked, but then the problem was that they became like they were clothed in glory, but then they kind of realized they were naked, and the Snow White thing, and it's sort of like, um, well, Adam and Eve, they did already have a sort of knowledge of like what to do and what not to do. They knew that they
But they were
shouldn't eat the
instructed,
apple.
right? They were
Yeah,
instructed by God what to do and what not to do. They
yeah.
walked with him,
So
right?
they did have a knowledge of good and evil, maybe in a sense, and they tried to kind of take it too far. Maybe
No, no, but like I think it goes from the snake, right? Like, and you shall be like God or gods. I think it's gods, but like I don't even want to get into that one. But basically, what it says is, okay, so you're in this sacred place, right? You're in this garden, and you want to control that which should be gardened, right? Should be cultivated,
mhm.
right? That's what they want. Like this is what science is doing with uh, DNA, right? Like all these, like if you want to have a DNA treatment, you're controlling that which brings you into being at a fundamental level.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, yeah.
And is same with genetic mutations of food or well like even the industrialization of the production, right? It's taking things out of how they happen and imposing a human will, right? Like a human manifestation, which cannot, right? Like I'm going to repeat this, cannot account for the consequences, right? And I think that's why they get kicked out because they do something that they cannot account for the consequences for, and that's the transgression, right? Like they're breaking something in the natural order or the heavenly order that disconnects them from God, right? And now they've broken His creation, which is kind of what we seem to be doing right now, right? Like we're kind of breaking His creation, and now we are cursed. We have to deal with the consequences.
Yeah, and the structures that we used to live in have been broken apart, and we can't just go back.
Well, we don't want to. like
Well,
we'll go back if God tells us to, right? Like like then there's no debating.
yeah, but I think my point is just that we've gone so far from the tradition that gave life to everything that and it's been so deconstructed and changed through the times that um it's no longer clear like what like where the walls used to be, where the boundaries used to be? What
No,
exactly
I
is the right way to do things?
no,
Or
like
do you think it's easy to tell?
no, I'm seeing them,
You're seeing them.
right?
Okay.
Right? So why am I seeing them? Well, maybe not all of them, but like I see plenty of them. Like if I commune with a bunch of other people who see things I don't see, then we can have the whole picture, right? I don't see that as a problem. No. What I do see as a
Okay.
problem is that nobody's listening to, right? Like and subscribe. But no, but you get the problem, right? Like we lost the structural thing because we have the hedonism thing, right? Like it's like, well, just do my thing, and then you can't hear anymore, right? Like even if you like, not that you could in the past, but that like as a society we cannot hear anymore. And I was having this discussion with my dad, and he's saying, well, like government can do this to you except if you have a religious exemption, right? And it was about enforced vaccination. I'm like, okay, so the government will push everybody back into church. That's what you're telling me. Because like if they don't want to be vaccinated and that's the only way out, then you're literally pushing everybody into church. And you see these patterns, right? It's like people, well, like what is this? Shelter, right? Like refuge. So when do you go to refuge? When you're looking for it. So when the pressure starts building, people will flee back to religion because that's the only thing that can hold them. And they're eternal truths that are self-evident, right? You shall know them by their fruits. So I think they're accessible to everybody with ears to hear and eyes to see. That the question is, do you want to dedicate yourself to cultivating ears and eyes? And I'm confident that there's plenty of Christians that actually have ears and eyes, but they're not on social media and they're not in in the head. They're in the tail. So that's their
Mhm.
sin. They should be in the head. And why are they not? Yeah, no, I'm preaching. But where were we going? Oh yeah, the Garden of Eden, right? So they get cast out, right, and they get cursed. And what gets cursed most, right? That which made them transgress in the first place. And I think like it's the eternal fight or something, right? Between Adam and the snake, I think, or between Eve and the snake. I don't know.
It's kind of between Eve's heel and the snake. Like there's lots of stuff
Right.
in
So
these
if you
curses.
so
Yeah.
if you look at Eve, it's like the feminine, right, which is the vessel that which receives, right, or even the garden, right, like even as Eve is also the garden in some sense,
Hmm.
and
Yeah,
and
and it's like Adam is cursed to like work the land and all this sort of
labor.
stuff. And like working, well, it kind of
Well, but
means
what is labor, right? Like, what does it mean that the man labors?
means that the woman isn't laboring.
No, but like if the woman is the womb and the man labors,
Oh,
right? And the womb is that which relates to the snake.
yeah. I'm not sure I get your point.
Well, like laboring is literally the getting out of the baby, right? Like the the,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
the movement from contained to uncontainment. So it's bringing into expression, bringing into being, right? That part is to the man, but like then the woman is the one who holds that which needs to be expressed into being.
yeah. What I was referring to with Adam's curse and working the land is that the specific word that's used there is kind of tilling the ground. So he's cursed to tilling the ground forever, and whatever will kind of come out of it will come out of it, and that's what he will eat. If it's bad, it's
Mhm.
bad. If it's edible, it's edible. So it's like you're eternally condemned to just breaking apart structure and just eating whatever you get from it.
Well, also planting seeds,
Yeah,
right?
maybe.
And like having the right soil for the seed, like that, like like when I hear tilling, I'm not reducing it to like it's that which the farmer does, right?
Yeah.
Like in some sense, it's taking care of the animals, right? Shepherding the animals, but a level lower,
Yeah.
which is that's super profound, and I can't understand the consequences of that one. But that's
Yeah.
Abel and Cain, right? That's Abel and Cain.
Like Genesis is just like yeah.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Like, why is this a thing? Now,
What do you
now I
mean?
destroyed my own brain. Was like,
Oh yeah,
like
yeah,
I can't see. I can't see beyond here.
yeah.
Like I know that there's a lot there, but I can't see it.
Yep. Better read
Yeah.
it again.
Yeah. Now I kind of have to. So yeah. We want to kind of conclude on this, right? It's like it's definitely opening up a bunch of avenues for me. I
Well,
hope.
I'm glad that yeah, it's opening up. Thank you for bringing everything to the table that you did. Actually, tons of really good stuff, and I think it's obvious that we could keep going for a long time uh, on like all the other words as well. And there's like 10 more slides, so a bunch of more words. But I didn't think those were as important as these, at least not
Yeah. So
initially.
yeah. So I want to have kind of a reflection of the viewers, right? Like, cause I don't, I like, I'm just like bzzzt, grasping everything together, but like, I don't know if it's intelligible what I'm doing and relatable. So I'd like, how was that for you?
I mean, it's like always, we're operating with very high categories. So at the very least, definitely, I can grasp the basic insight um, of the thing that you're pointing towards. I definitely can. But all of this is difficult stuff, and I think it just shows how these words, how the specifics of the English are kind of like just the emanations and the applications of these kind of metaphysical or like high level abstract movements and definitions, you know?
Fundamentals is what I would use, right?
Okay.
Because I like this is where I'm like they're not axiomatic, but they're like the building blocks, right?
Yep.
Like like they're like the archetypical movements because I've been thinking about Greek as well, just these archetypical movements where you you throw things away, right? Like what does that mean? Well, like it's a separation from you with space, right? And there's force behind it, right? Like so there's all of these things that come in there, and that is like this super category that whatever domain you go into, right? There's an analog, right? So it's like in some sense, it's it's like the level of God, right? Where where you can see a way in which God works, right? that's universal. And now I'm here anyways. Like I think that's what seeing God brings, right? You have these things that are applicable everywhere, right? So now you can see what's trustworthy in every domain, even if you don't have uh, advanced knowledge of that domain, right? And and if we're talking about shalom, right? Like if you have all the categories, right? All of them, and you have a way to bring them together in Christ, what does he bring? Well, that's peace, right? Like now you can face anything because you already know, right? Like you don't know the specifics, right? And or this is why I'm going into this rant, right? It's like, yeah, we're dealing with abstract high level things, right? And they're supposed to get flesh, right? And we've been talking about how they are getting flesh, right? And having a relationship to that, right? Like we can see this, right? Like we can see this in our lives happening if only we pay attention. And when we start seeing the world in that way, now that peace comes, right? Like now we have a sense of certainty that when we talk about insatiable things in ourselves, right? That is which allows us to be satiated, right? Like it allows us to have full confidence because it's true. Um,
Yep, it's the full participation of things in goodness
um,
and the fruits from that.
yes, right. And oh yeah, and then like if we're talking about witnessing or fulfillment or something, if you participate like that in the world, you stand out. Like you are surrounded by glory for the people with eyes to see. Um, and then you can do that in groups as well, which is like I don't know, like I don't know how far away we are from that stuff in modern society.
We're working towards it.
We're trying. We're trying. Well, we do it here a little bit, right? Like we're actually manifesting some of that here. Just to get it in someone's name. Uh, things are happening. Um, yeah. So yeah, do you want to have a reflection on your experience and maybe some takeaways?
My reflection is that it's been super valuable talking to you about this, and it's been very valuable preparing it and going
Mm,
through lots of different words and considering why they're important and why not. And I'm very excited about symbolism in general. Uh, you got me. I'm a big nerd, and uh, and I think probably my favorite association that you made is about the creepy crawlies.
mhm.
I think that's I think that's very important.
Yeah, I think it's really creepy. But yeah, like we should definitely delve into that one because like there seems to be some intelligibility that's not properly revealed. So yeah, like like I want a lot of feedback on this video if possible because it's different format, different style of communicating. Me not using this button properly, and yeah, so feedback on everything, like how this went, how do you like it, you want more of it. I think we'll make the second set of words. Like I also feel a lot about going through Genesis, like the 1, 2, and 3. Uh, well, maybe not two, but at least 1 and 3, at a more uh, linguistic level to see the things that we we don't pick up, and maybe talk about why, because that's also a big one, right? Like it's like, oh, it's all there, but like why is it hidden? like why is it in the garden? Like, and why are we outside? Uh, so yeah, any last words?
This was fun.
Well, thanks for watching.